Okay, so today is Wednesday, December 4th, 2024. Let's pull up our list of Bitcoin mining-centric stocks. So right up there at the very top of the list is BitDigital. They had a phenomenal day, right? Closing well above 13+%. Not far behind TeraWulf, which had a phenomenal day. And by the way, closing above $8 a share, that's very impressive. It has been quite some time since TeraWulf has had that kind of performance, to say the least, right? So I'm happy for all of you in the Wulf Pack. Hey, that's a pretty damn good return today. And then finally, in our third spot is Cipher Mining with a very respectable 10+% return. You know, the one company that has been falling quite dramatically, it seems, this entire week is Argo. And it was down again today, well over 16%, almost 17%, closing at about 68 cents a share. I don't quite understand what's going on there. I'll have to take a look. If you happen to be an Argo shareholder and you kind of have a better sense of what's going on, please let me know in the comments. It looks very painful, to say the least. So speaking of comments, so I wanted to just highlight a couple of thoughts that were shared in the comments to recent broadcasts that have been made. One individual points out, I think quite astutely, yes, BitFarms is growing slowly, but $2 range is not a fair assessment. In the end, I think they are hesitant because of the Riot involvement. The Riot takeover play is probably the reason. Somebody else pointed out something that I think I'm a little bit partial to, right? The answer, or I'm partial to in the sense that I think this could be something along the lines of what ultimately happens. So this individual says, I think BitFarms will acquire Stronghold and then Riot will buy BitFarms, which is good. I personally have shares in all of them. So, you know, this is sort of a question I asked in the comment section to a recent broadcast is like, hey, what price would Riot have to present for you to consider selling your shares? And I think I put the number $6 out there, right? So, you know, Riot owns about 20% of BitFarms. What if they offered about $6 a share for the remaining shares that they don't already own? Would that be enough for you as a BitFarm shareholder to say, you know what? Why don't we just roll this all up into Riot? I know some of you really don't like Riot, by the way. And I want to acknowledge that. I'm not pro-Riot per se, but by the same token, they own 20% of BitFarms. Okay? And hey, if they put a number on the table that's more along the lines of, say, you know, $5.50, $6, I think there are a lot of individuals who may not necessarily care what their personal views are with regard to Riot. They're just thinking, hey, my shares suddenly, you know, practically, you know, tripled in price. That's good. That's good enough. I'll take it. So we'll have to see. I will say, somebody else pointed out, and I thought this was a pretty good comment too, you know, BTC needs to 5x minimum to like roughly 300,000 by October 2025. You know, I think the fear that many individuals have shared, right, is BitFarms going to participate in this bull run? I mean, if Bitcoin's already at nearly 200, I'm sorry, right, we can only wish it were nearly at $200,000 a coin. Bitcoin is already at nearly $100,000 a coin. And BitFarms, if I'm not mistaken, closed today at about $2.14 a share. You know, that's not admittedly a very inspiring share price. You know, hey, maybe if it were $3.50 a share, maybe closer to $4, right? Maybe closing in on $5. I think there would be a bit more enthusiasm to think, hey, you know what, BitFarms, or at least shares of BitFarms, you know, are participating in this rally. What is it going to take? Hey, look, a couple of individuals said, you know what, hey, if we can hit at least 15 exahash by year end, maybe 16 exahash in operational hash rate, hey, that demonstrates that BitFarms is well on the way to really implementing, right, this growth strategy. Hey, maybe that starts to reinvigorate interest in the stock. I tend to agree with that. You know, hey, to the extent that some additional growth initiatives with regard to the Stronghold digital mining assets that are being acquired, right? If there's more news and detail with regard to those growth plans and how that growth is going to be funded, when it can be operational, what the, you know, the net result, right, to the bottom line, so to speak, is going to be, I think these are all things that can add a degree of excitement and momentum to shares of BitFarms because, as we've said before, right, there's a lot of different options that are out there insofar as gaining exposure to the price of Bitcoin, right? It could be another Bitcoin mining company. It can certainly be one of the many exchange-traded ETFs, right? You know, that track the price of Bitcoin. It could even be options on some of those ETFs. It could be a company like MicroStrategy, right? I mean, there's just so many permutations, right? So many options that exist out there. Hey, why BitFarms? Why would BitFarms be a place to allocate capital? So I think this is where we kind of get into that discussion of like, all right, what does BitFarms need to do to really start getting back right on track? And from what I'm hearing, and I tend to agree with this to some degree, is like, hey, look, you got to get the operations in check, right? Got to make sure that we're executing, got to make sure that we're hitting our milestones, got to make sure that we're, if not hitting those milestones, then hopefully exceeding the milestones, right? And not falling back on like, hey, I'm sorry, we missed our goal, right? Because that's not very inspiring as compared to like some of the, other activities that are taking place just within our own industry, right? The Bitcoin mining industry. The other thing that has come up that I'm going to really address in more detail tomorrow is kind of this issue of like Canada and the United States. And hey, this issue of tariffs, right, that could potentially be applied to various, sectors of the Canadian economy, so to speak. I'm trying to simplify it a bit. And maybe more specifically to Canada, hey, to the extent there were to be a federal election, perhaps by spring of 2025. If I'm not mistaken, I think there has to be an election by October of 2025. But hey, what if there were an election before then? What would be in the best interest of BitFarms? Would it make sense for there to continue to be a minority liberal government, right, that to some degree enjoys the support of, the NDP? Or, hey, would it make sense for there to potentially be either a minority or majority conservative government? And, I shy away from politics on this particular channel with regard to these broadcasts, but I think as it relates to the topic of BitFarms, and having an environment in Canada that's conducive, right, for Bitcoin mining operators such as BitFarms, I do think it's appropriate in that very, very narrow context to explore, what some of these possibilities might mean for BitFarms. And certainly, I think regardless of whether or not there's a federal election in the spring in Canada or in the fall, I do think the incoming Trump administration, right, the potential exists for there to be some issues as it relates to U.S.-Canadian relations, economic relations. Hopefully it's not more than that, right? That it doesn't become too tense or too kind of challenging. I love Canada. I've spent quite a bit of time in Canada. I consider London, Ontario to be my adopted Ontario hometown, and Montreal to be my adopted Quebec hometown. Anyway, let's talk more about Canada, U.S., and all those topics tomorrow. In the meantime, let's stay positive, let's stay great, let's be great, and we'll see each other tomorrow.